I had just finished packing up my toolbox when Mrs. Lewis called out to me from across the hedge. "James, love, do you reckon you could help my niece with her fence? It's barely holding together." I glanced over and saw the weather-beaten wooden slats leaning awkwardly at the edge of the garden next door. I'd just finished repainting Mrs. Lewis's kitchen cabinets and was looking forward to a weekend off. But she had that look. The one old ladies give you when they know you'll cave in. "All right, I'll take a look," I said, slinging my tools over my shoulder. I wasn't expecting anyone to be home, but as I approached, a woman stepped out from the conservatory. She looked about my age, late 20s maybe. Slim, with curly brown hair tied back in a loose ponytail. Her jeans were speckled with paint, and there was a smudge of dirt on her cheek. She looked surprised to see me. "You must be James," she said, offering a hand. "I'm Eleanor." "Nice to meet you," I replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was firmer than I expected. The fence was a mess. Broken posts, rusted nails, and a bit of ivy clinging on for dear life. "I can patch it up, but really, it needs replacing," I said after a quick inspection. "Do whatever you think is best," she said. "I'm renting the place for a bit. Just moved down from Manchester. Thought I'd try the quiet village life." We got to talking while I worked. She brought me lemonade, then tea, then a sandwich, and before long we were laughing over stories about bad landlords and worse weather. She had this dry, sarcastic humor that caught me off guard more than once. Made me grin. It was just after I'd drilled in the final screw that she leaned against the garden table, arms folded, and looked me dead in the eye. "Do you have a girlfriend?" I paused mid-pack, the question hanging in the air like a kite caught in a tree. No. "Why?" She shrugged, though there was a glint in her eye. "Just wondering." She left it at that, turned back toward the house, and disappeared inside with a smile that I couldn't quite read. I stood there for a moment, unsure whether I'd imagined the whole thing. The wind tugged gently at the freshly repaired fence. I'd done a good job. But now, suddenly, I wasn't thinking about timber or tools anymore. Eleanor had changed something. A flicker of intrigue that hadn't been there before. And I knew I'd be seeing her again. A few days passed. I kept telling myself to forget about it. People make small talk. People flirt sometimes. It doesn't always mean something. But Eleanor wasn't easy to forget. I kept catching myself walking by her garden, slowing my steps, listening for the sound of her laughter through the open windows. The village was small, quiet, the kind of place where the most exciting thing might be a new post on the community notice board. But since Eleanor arrived, it felt like something had shifted. Saturday morning came around, and I was tidying up the back of my van when I heard her voice again. "You always working, James?" I looked up and saw her leaning on her garden gate, a takeaway coffee cup in each hand. "Sometimes," I said, brushing sawdust off my shirt. "Well," she said, walking over and offering me one of the cups. "Even workmen deserve a break." I took the coffee. Our fingers brushed, just for a second, but it lingered in my mind far longer than it should have. We sat on the low stone wall between our gardens. She told me more about her life in Manchester, about leaving behind a marketing job that paid well but drained her soul. She was trying to write now short stories, she said, though she'd never shown anyone. "You ever do anything creative?" she asked, nudging me with her elbow. "I make crooked fences stand up straight," I said with a smirk. That's practically poetry. There was something easy about being with her. No pressure. No games. Just that spark, subtle but unmistakable. As we sat in silence for a moment, the spring breeze picking up, she glanced at me again. "James, I didn't mean to make things awkward the other day. Asking if you had a girlfriend." "It wasn't awkward," I replied, meaning it. "Just surprising." "Well," she said, taking a sip from her coffee, "I ask because I don't like wasting time. Life's short." I looked at her, then really looked. Her eyes were sharp but warm, curious but guarded, like she wanted to trust someone but wasn't sure if it was safe yet. "I'm not taken," I said quietly. "And I'm not in a rush, but I'm not scared either." She nodded, as if that was all she needed to hear. Just then, a car horn sounded from the lane. She glanced at her watch and stood up. That'll be the Tesco delivery. I'll see you around, James.
Yeah, see you.
She walked away, and I was left sitting there with half a coffee and a racing mind. Something was building, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor and I fell into an easy rhythm. She'd wave when I left for work. I'd pop over to help her shift something too heavy or fix a squeaky gate. It was subtle, casual, but the air between us was never still. Then, one rainy afternoon, I found myself knocking on her door. I'd just returned from a job and had noticed her garden lights flickering. Not a major issue, but it gave me a reason to check in. She opened the door, hair tied in a messy bun, jumper sleeves pushed up, a smear of flour on her cheek. Baking? I asked, stepping inside as she waved me through. Something like that, she said, smiling. I find it calming. Her cottage was warm and full of soft, mismatched furniture. Books lay stacked on the coffee table. A half-finished jigsaw covered one corner of the dining room. It wasn't perfectly tidy, but it felt lived in. Honest. I fixed the outdoor light while she made tea. When I came back inside, she handed me a mug and gestured for me to sit. I was going to ask you something, she said, standing by the window. It's a bit personal. I raised an eyebrow. Go on. You ever have something in your past that you don't talk about? Not because it's shameful, but because people wouldn't get it. Her voice was quieter now, almost hesitant. I suppose everyone does, I said, careful with my tone. Why? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned and sat opposite me, legs tucked beneath her. I used to be engaged, she said finally. 2 years ago. It ended badly. I nodded, not pressing. He was charming, successful. My parents adore him. But he had a way of making me feel small, like I didn't matter unless I was doing something for him. It took me far too long to realize that wasn't love. I leaned back, watching her closely. And now I'm trying to be braver, to listen to my gut. And sometimes, she paused, glancing at me. Sometimes my gut tells me something good is standing right in front of me. The room felt suddenly smaller, warmer. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't try to say the perfect thing. I just let the silence settle. Finally, she stood, brushing invisible crumbs from her trousers. Anyway, thanks for fixing the light. I stood too, placing the empty mug on the counter. Anytime. She walked me to the door, and just as I turned to leave, she spoke again. James, I'd like to show you something. Maybe tomorrow. If you've got time. I met her eyes. I've got time. Whatever it was, I knew it mattered. And I had the feeling that once I saw it, there'd be no going back. The next evening, I returned to Eleanor's cottage just after sunset. The sky over Dorset was streaked with orange and purple, casting long shadows across the village lanes. She greeted me with a quiet smile, then led me through the hallway without saying much. We stopped outside a small door at the end of the corridor, one I hadn't seen open before. She hesitated, her hand on the handle. This room's been shut for a long time, she said softly. I wasn't sure if I'd ever open it again. She turned the handle and pushed it open. The room inside was small, barely more than a box, but it was filled with light, a string of fairy lights along the ceiling, photographs on the walls, a dusty easel standing in the corner beside a table covered in brushes and tubes of paint. It smelled faintly of turpentine and old memories. This was mine, she said. Before everything went sideways. I used to paint. I was even preparing for an exhibition once. I stepped inside, careful not to touch anything. What happened? My ex didn't see the point in it. Said I was wasting time. That I'd never make money from it, so why bother? One day, I just stopped. Put it all away. She crossed to the easel, gently touching the wooden frame. I haven't painted since we broke up. Not properly. I looked around. The walls held her work, portraits, landscapes, abstract emotions in brushstrokes. One painting caught my eye. It was a seaside cliff, battered by storm clouds, a lone figure standing at the edge. Did you ever show this to anyone? I asked. She shook her head. Not after he left. I didn't see the point. I stepped closer, studying the canvas. You should. She smiled, but there was pain in it. I've been thinking about it more lately. About trying again. Something about you make me want to try. The moment hung between us like a held breath. I didn't know what to say, not because there weren't words, but because they didn't feel like enough. So instead, I stepped beside her and looked at the painting again. It's beautiful, I said, and powerful, like someone who found the courage to stand their ground, no matter the storm. She turned to me, eyes bright. I'd like to paint you. The request caught me off guard, but I nodded slowly. All right, just don't make me look too serious. She laughed, a soft, honest laugh that filled the room.
Deal.
As we left the studio and returned to the living room, something between us had shifted. It wasn't just flirtation anymore. It was trust. The kind you can't fake, not even with the best intentions. And though neither of us said it, we both knew that room wouldn't stay closed again. The next morning, I was back at the cottage. Eleanor had asked me to help mend the garden gate, and I jumped at the excuse. The spring air was crisp, and the garden smelled of rosemary and damp soil. We worked side by side in companionable silence. Her hair was tied up, loose strands curling around her cheeks. I caught myself watching her more than once. She noticed, smirked, but said nothing. Around midday, we stopped for tea. She brought out a tray with cups, scones, and clotted cream, and we sat on the back steps, the sun warming our faces. I've started sketching again, she said, stirring her tea. That night opening the studio, it did something. I smiled. You did that. Not me. She shook her head. Maybe. But sometimes, it just takes the right person standing beside you. Before I could reply, we heard tires crunching on gravel. Eleanor frowned and stood, shielding her eyes against the sun. A dark blue car pulled up in front of the house. Sleek, polished, expensive. Too expensive for this village. A man stepped out. Tall, sharp suit, confident gait. He looked like he belonged in a London boardroom, not on a country lane. Eleanor stiffened. Her teacup trembled slightly as she set it down. Oh no, she murmured. Who is it? She didn't answer, just stepped forward slowly as the man approached the gate. Eleanor, he said with a practiced smile, voice smooth like oil. You look well. Her voice was tight. What are you doing here, Marcus?
Ah.
So this was the ex. I was in the area. Thought I'd stop by. Catch up. Eleanor folded her arms. You haven't called in over a year. He chuckled. Well, that's not entirely true. I texted. She didn't smile. I stood behind her, quietly assessing him. He glanced at me, the faintest flicker of disdain in his eyes, but said nothing. You're wasting your time, she said. I've moved on. From what?
Me?
The life we had. He gestured vaguely at the cottage. This place, it's charming in a sort of broken-down way, but don't you miss the real world? Eleanor's jaw tightened. I never missed the way you made me feel. Marcus glanced at me again, now with deliberate curiosity. And this? Is this the replacement? He has a name, Eleanor snapped. And he's not here to impress you. I remained silent, letting her speak. This was her fight, not mine. Marcus's smile faltered for just a moment. I see. Well, I suppose I've made my point. I'll leave you to your fences and portraits. He turned, walking back to his car with that same polished arrogance. As the engine started and he drove off, Eleanor exhaled sharply and sat down on the step again. Sorry about that, she muttered. No need, I said. He said more about himself than he realized. She looked at me, her eyes soft. Thanks for not jumping in. I figured you had it handled.
I did, she said.
Then added, but it felt good knowing you were there. The gate creaked slightly in the breeze. A reminder that some things break, but others can be rebuilt, stronger than before. The days after Marcus's visit felt heavy, like the air itself was charged with something unspoken. Eleanor threw herself into her work, painting late into the night, her hands trembling with each brushstroke. I kept busy too, fixing the fence as she'd asked, but my mind wandered to the strange tension I'd sensed between them. There was more to their story, I was sure of it. One afternoon, Eleanor invited me inside her studio. The walls were covered with canvases, half-finished portraits staring back like ghosts. "Do you want to see something?" she asked, voice quieter than usual. She led me to a corner where a covered canvas stood. With a deep breath, she pulled the cloth away. It was a painting of a young girl, barely a child, with eyes too wise for her age. The girl's face was haunting, her expression caught between hope and fear. "That's my sister," Eleanor said softly. I stared at the portrait, feeling the weight of its story. "She disappeared 5 years ago," Eleanor continued. "No one knows what happened. Marcus and we argued over it. He blamed me for not doing enough." I nodded slowly, understanding the deeper scars beneath their breakup. "I never stopped looking," she whispered. "But some secrets are hard to uncover." I reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore." Her eyes met mine, glistening with something like gratitude and something else, maybe hope. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves, as if nature itself was holding its breath. After that day in the studio, a fragile bond began to form between Eleanor and me. She started sharing more about her life, her fears, and the pain she had carried for so long. One chilly morning, Eleanor invited me for a walk through the village. The streets were quiet, wrapped in the soft mist that lingered over the countryside. "I haven't been out much lately," she admitted, pulling her coat tighter around her. "The past few years have felt like a blur." We wandered past the old church and the little bookshop, places that seemed untouched by time. I listened as she spoke about her childhood, the dreams she once had, and how they had been shattered. "I want to believe that one day I'll find answers about my sister," she said, her voice steady but fragile. Suddenly, she stopped and looked up at me. "Thank you for being here. It's strange, but I feel like I can trust you." Her words caught me off guard. Trust was not something she gave lightly, yet here it was, offered in a quiet moment beneath the gray sky. That night, as I worked on the fence, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both standing at the edge of something, a truth waiting to be uncovered. But in the shadows, someone was watching, waiting to keep those secrets buried. A few days later, as the afternoon sun began to dip behind the rolling hills, there was a knock at my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Opening it, I found a man standing there, tall and serious, dressed in a sharp coat. His eyes scanned me quickly before he spoke. "Are you Thomas Miller?" "I'm Detective Inspector Clark." My heart skipped. A police officer in our quiet village was unusual, especially without warning. "I'm investigating a cold case, the disappearance of Eleanor's sister," he said, his tone firm but respectful. I invited him in. Over tea, he explained that new evidence had come to light, prompting the police to reopen the investigation after all these years. He asked me about Eleanor, what I knew, and if I'd noticed anything strange. I told him about our conversations, the diary, and the moment Eleanor's composure broke. Detective Clark nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes, the smallest detail can crack a case wide open. After he left, I felt a mixture of hope and fear. Could this finally bring justice for Eleanor's sister? Or would it stir up more danger than we were ready for? The night felt colder than before, as if the past was reaching out from the shadows to pull us in. The next morning, the village buzzed with whispers. News of the police visit had spread fast. Eleanor seemed tense, her usual calm replaced by restless energy. Detective Clark returned with a folder full of old case files. He invited me and Eleanor to his office in the nearby town. As we sifted through faded photographs and yellowed letters, a hidden truth began to emerge. There was a name mentioned repeatedly, someone close to Eleanor's family, someone trusted. Eleanor's hands trembled as she pointed to a letter, her voice barely above a whisper. This changes everything." The detective's eyes narrowed. "We may be closer to answers than you think." Outside, the sky darkened with heavy clouds, mirroring the storm of emotions inside us. The peaceful village seemed a world away from the dark secrets now unfolding. I realized then that Eleanor and I were bound not just by friendship, but by a shared journey into the past, a journey that could either free us or destroy us. As we left the office, Detective Clark warned, "Be careful who you trust. Some secrets are protected fiercely." That night, I lay awake wondering who among us was hiding the truth, and what lengths they would go to keep it buried. The following days were a whirlwind of discovery and danger. Eleanor and I delved deeper into the past, piecing together fragments of a story that had been locked away for decades. One evening, as we returned to the cottage, a shadow moved in the garden. A voice called out from the darkness, cold and familiar. It was Henry, Eleanor's cousin, the very person mentioned in the letters. His eyes held a mixture of anger and fear. "You don't know what you're meddling with," he warned. But Eleanor stood firm. "It's time the truth came out. No more lies." Henry hesitated, then revealed a confession that shook us both, a betrayal, a long-hidden crime that had changed the course of their family's history. The village, the police, even our own lives were entwined in a web of deceit and sacrifice. As dawn broke over the quiet countryside, Eleanor and I knew this was only the beginning. Justice might be slow, but secrets no longer had power over us. The fence, once broken, was now mended, a symbol of trust rebuilt and new paths ahead.